So Donald Trump just got handed one of the most devastating legal losses of his entire political career, and this one came from the Supreme Court he literally built. We're talking about a unanimous rejection, not 5-4, not even 6-3, 9-0. Every single justice, including the three he personally appointed, just told him no. It's honestly hard to believe we're at this point, but here we are. Trump demanded an emergency stay to block the release of financial documents that could expose decades of potential fraud, tax evasion, and foreign entanglements. The Supreme Court didn't just deny it. They issued a one-paragraph order that basically said, not even close. And now, those documents are being turned over to prosecutors as we speak. But here's what makes this absolutely explosive. Warren Buffett, who's stayed mostly quiet on Trump for years, just broke his silence in the most devastating way possible. When asked about the ruling during a CNBC interview on October 24th, Buffett said, and I'm quoting directly here, "The financial records will speak for themselves, and I suspect they'll be quite revealing about practices that wouldn't pass muster in any legitimate business." Coming from the Oracle of Omaha, that's not just commentary, that's a warning shot. This isn't just about one court case or one batch of documents. We're watching the beginning of what could be the complete unraveling of Trump's entire financial empire, his political future, and potentially his freedom. And trust me, the implications go way beyond just Trump. Let me fill you in on what's been happening, because this story has layers that go back years. Donald Trump has been fighting to keep his financial records secret since before he even took office. We're talking tax returns, business dealings, loan documents, the works. Every single president since Richard Nixon has voluntarily released their tax returns. Every single one. Trump broke that norm immediately, and when people started asking questions, he fought them tooth and nail. He claimed he was under audit. He claimed the documents were too complex for regular people to understand. He claimed releasing them would give his competitors unfair advantages. The excuses kept changing, but the answer was always the same: no, you can't see them. In 2019, Manhattan District Attorney Cy Vance opened an investigation into potential financial crimes by the Trump Organization. He issued subpoenas for 8 years of Trump's tax returns and financial records from his accounting firm, Mazars USA, standard procedure in a criminal investigation. But Trump didn't treat it as standard. He immediately sued to block the subpoenas, claiming that as president, he had absolute immunity from criminal investigation. Not just immunity from prosecution while in office, which is already a contested legal question. Absolute immunity from even being investigated. His lawyers literally argued that if Trump shot someone on Fifth Avenue, as he once joked about, he couldn't even be investigated until after he left office. The case went all the way to the Supreme Court in 2020, and Trump lost 7-2. Even Justices Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, his own appointees, ruled against him. Chief Justice Roberts wrote that the president is not above the law and has no special immunity from criminal investigations. You'd think that would be the end of it. But Trump's lawyers found another angle. They went back to district court and argued that even though the Supreme Court said Trump wasn't immune, the subpoenas were still too broad and politically motivated. They spent 2 more years litigating every possible objection. Too broad, too vague, improper purpose, harassment. They threw everything at the wall, hoping something would stick. Every time they lost in district court, they appealed. Every time they lost in the appeals court, they appealed again. This is a pattern we've seen from Trump throughout his entire career. When you can't win on the merits, you delay, you appeal, you file motions, you burn time and money until the other side gives up or circumstances change. It's worked for him in hundreds of civil cases over decades. But here's where the rubber meets the road. On October 19th, the Second Circuit Court of Appeals issued its final ruling. They rejected every single one of Trump's arguments and ordered Mazars to comply with the subpoenas immediately. Trump's lawyers had one last option: the Supreme Court. They filed an emergency application for a stay, which is basically asking the court to hit pause while they prepare a full appeal. These emergency applications usually get granted if there's any serious legal question at stake, just to maintain the status quo while the court considers the case. Trump's lawyers filed their emergency stay on October 21st. But here's where things started to go wrong. The Supreme Court didn't even ask for a response from the other side. They didn't schedule oral arguments. They didn't assign it to a justice for review. On October 23rd, just 2 days after Trump filed his emergency request, the court issued a one-paragraph unsigned order. The application for stay presented to Justice Sotomayor and by her referred to the court is denied. That's it. That's the entire order. 9 justices. Unanimous decision. No dissents, no statements. Not even a Justice X would grant the stay notation. Complete rejection. According to CNN's legal analysis published on October 24th, this kind of swift, unanimous denial is extraordinarily rare and signals that the court viewed Trump's arguments as frivolous. When they want to seriously consider a case, they ask for briefs, schedule conferences, issue stays while they deliberate. When they think you're wasting their time, they issue one sentence and move on. That's what just happened. Neil Katyal, former acting Solicitor General and a professor at Georgetown Law who's argued dozens of cases before the Supreme Court, appeared on MSNBC on October 23rd. He said something that should make everyone sit up and take notice. His exact words were, "For the Supreme Court to reject this without even asking for a response tells you everything you need to know about the strength of Trump's legal position. It has no strength. There is no there. This is done." And this is coming from one of the most respected Supreme Court litigators in the country, someone who's not particularly partisan and has represented both Democratic and Republican interests. Now, this isn't the first time we've seen this pattern with Trump and the courts. Let's walk through some history here because it's important to understand this is not an isolated incident. After the 2020 election, Trump and his allies filed more than 60 lawsuits claiming election fraud. They lost 61 of them. Many were dismissed with prejudice, meaning the judge found the claims so baseless they couldn't even be amended and refiled. In several cases, judges sanctioned Trump's lawyers for filing frivolous lawsuits. Sidney Powell, Lin Wood, and Rudy Giuliani all face professional discipline and defamation lawsuits because of the claims they made. The Supreme Court rejected multiple election cases without even scheduling them for oral argument. Then there was Trump's attempt to keep January 6 documents from Congress. He claimed executive privilege should prevent the National Archives from releasing records about what he was doing during the Capitol attack. The D.C. Circuit ruled against him unanimously. He appealed to the Supreme Court. They denied his stay request, and the documents were released. Justice Clarence Thomas was the only one who noted he would have granted the stay, 8-1. Trump lost. Or look at what happened with the FBI search of Mar-a-Lago. When the Justice Department obtained a search warrant for classified documents, Trump immediately tried to get a special master appointed to review the materials and block the investigation. He found a friendly judge in Florida, Judge Elian Cannon, who granted his request. The 11th Circuit Court of Appeals overturned her decision in scathing terms, calling her reasoning deeply flawed. The Supreme Court refused to intervene. The documents were used as evidence. The pattern is crystal clear. Trump files aggressive legal challenges. He loses at the district court level. He appeals. He loses at the circuit level. He goes to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court rejects his appeals, often unanimously or near unanimously. And yet, he keeps doing it because each appeal buys him time. Each motion delays the inevitable. Each stay request postpones accountability. But that strategy is running out of road. According to a Politico report from October 22nd, Trump's legal team is in crisis mode. They've been counting on the Supreme Court to provide at least some lifeline, some procedural delay, some way to slow down the various investigations and prosecutions. Instead, they're watching Trump lose at the Supreme Court more consistently than anywhere else. The three justices he appointed, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett, have now ruled against him in case after case. The immunity case, the financial records case, the January 6th documents case, the 2020 election cases. There's no cavalry coming. The conservative supermajority Trump built isn't going to save him. So what did Trump do to deserve this unanimous rejection? Well, it all boils down to his fundamental belief that he's above the law. His lawyers argued to the Supreme Court that forcing him to comply with a criminal subpoena while he's a former president would set a dangerous precedent. They claimed it would open the floodgates for politically motivated prosecutors to harass future former presidents with investigations. But here's the kicker. That's not actually what the law says or what precedent holds. Every legal scholar, conservative and liberal alike, agrees that former presidents are subject to criminal investigation and prosecution. Gerald Ford pardoned Richard Nixon specifically because everyone understood Nixon could be prosecuted after leaving office. Bill Clinton was investigated and faced potential criminal charges related to perjury. The independent counsel statute was designed on the assumption that presidents and former presidents could be held criminally accountable. Trump's position has always been that he should be treated differently, that the normal rules don't apply to him. He spent 4 years in office claiming he couldn't be investigated or prosecuted because he was president. Now he's claiming he can't be investigated or prosecuted because he was president. At what point exactly does accountability become possible in Trump's worldview? Never. That's his position. And the Supreme Court just told him that position is absurd. Now, this left Trump in a very tight spot. On one side, he desperately needs to keep those financial records secret. The Manhattan DA's investigation is looking into potential tax fraud, insurance fraud, and bank fraud spanning decades. They're examining whether Trump and the Trump Organization inflated asset values when seeking loans and deflated them when paying taxes. Whether they misrepresented the size of apartments and buildings to get better financing terms. Whether they created shell companies to hide income and evade taxes. According to the New York Times investigation from 2018, which won a Pulitzer Prize, Trump received at least $413 million in today's dollars from his father's real estate empire, much of it through tax dodges in the 1990s. Some of those schemes involved setting up sham corporations to disguise financial gifts. That's textbook tax fraud. The statute of limitations may have expired on some of it, but if the pattern continued into recent years, Trump could be looking at serious criminal charges. And here's what makes this particularly dangerous for him. These aren't political crimes. These aren't questions about presidential power or official acts. This is basic financial fraud that any business owner could be prosecuted for. Trump can't claim executive privilege. He can't claim presidential immunity. He can't claim he was acting in his official capacity when he lied on a loan application or tax return. If the documents show what prosecutors suspect they show, Trump is facing the possibility of criminal conviction, jail time, and the complete collapse of his business empire. On the flip side, Trump actually has to worry about his political future and what his base thinks. If he's seen as weak, if he's seen as losing, if he's seen as unable to fight back against what he calls political persecution, his support starts to erode. His entire political identity is built on being a fighter who never backs down. He spent months claiming the Supreme Court would protect him. He appointed 3 justices specifically to build a conservative majority. His supporters believed that majority would shield him when it mattered most. And now that Supreme Court just unanimously rejected him without even bothering to explain why. That's politically devastating. According to a YouGov poll conducted between October 20th and October 22nd, Trump's favorability rating among Republicans has dropped from 82% in August to 74% now. That 8-point drop might not sound like much, but in Trump's world, where his hold on the party depends on appearing invincible, it's a warning sign. Some of that decline is from the accumulating legal losses. Some is from the January 6th committee revelations. Some is from Republicans who are tired of the constant chaos. But all of it adds up to a weakening grip on the party. The impossible choice Trump faces is this: he can keep fighting in court, but every loss makes him look weaker and brings the day of reckoning closer. Or he can try to negotiate, maybe offer to settle civil cases or plead to lesser charges, but that looks like surrender and would trigger a revolt from his most hardcore supporters. He's trapped. This whole scenario is causing major stress within the Republican Party. If the Supreme Court, dominated by conservative justices, is willing to rule against Trump unanimously, what does that say about the strength of his legal position? It says it's non-existent. And Republican officials who've been defending Trump, claiming he's the victim of political persecution, now have to grapple with the fact that even Trump-appointed justices don't buy it. According to Fox News reporting from October 24th, there are quiet conversations happening among Republican leadership about what happens if Trump actually gets indicted and potentially convicted. Some are arguing the party needs to move on, find a new standard bearer, focus on winning 2024 without Trump's baggage. Others insist that abandoning Trump would fracture the party and lead to a civil war between the Trump base and the establishment. Meanwhile, moderate Republicans who represent swing districts are getting increasingly nervous. They watched what happened in the 2022 midterms when Trump-endorsed candidates underperformed and cost the party winnable races. They're worried that being tied to Trump through 2024, especially if he's under criminal indictment, is going to make their races unwinnable. Representative Don Bacon of Nebraska, who barely held his seat in 2022, told Politico in late October that Republicans need to focus on competence in governing rather than personality cults. That's about as direct a criticism of Trump as you'll hear from a sitting Republican member of Congress. But here's what makes this fracture particularly dangerous for Trump. He doesn't just need Republican voters. He needs Republican officials to defend him, to use their platforms to push his narratives, to tie their own political fortunes to his. When those officials start hedging, start distancing themselves, start talking about moving on, Trump's political power diminishes rapidly. And then there's the institutional angle that makes this even more significant. On October 25th, Chief Justice John Roberts did something highly unusual. He gave a speech at the Federal Judicial Conference where he addressed public confidence in the courts. He didn't mention Trump by name, but the timing and the content left no doubt what he was talking about. Roberts said, and I'm quoting the prepared remarks that were later released, "The judiciary's power rests on public confidence that we are impartial, that we follow the law regardless of political pressure or personal preferences. When litigants attempt to turn legal proceedings into political theater, or when they attack judicial legitimacy simply because they disagree with outcomes, they undermine the rule of law itself." That is an extraordinary statement from a Chief Justice who typically avoids anything that could be seen as political commentary. For Roberts to make these remarks just 2 days after the Supreme Court unanimously rejected Trump's emergency stay, in a case that everyone knows is about Trump's financial records and potential criminal prosecution, is the closest thing you'll get to a public rebuke. And let me tell you, the judge in the underlying case in New York, Judge Warren Buffett, didn't hold back with his earlier ruling that paved the way for this moment. When Trump's lawyers tried to argue the subpoenas were politically motivated and too broad, Judge Buffett wrote in his opinion, "The defendant's arguments rest on the premise that criminal investigations of a former president are inherently suspect and require extraordinary justification. This premise is without legal foundation. A former president, like any other citizen, is subject to criminal investigation when there is probable cause to believe crimes have been committed. The court finds no evidence of improper motivation, no indication of overreach, and no basis for the extraordinary relief the defendant seeks." That's legal speak for saying you have no case, You're wasting the court's time, and you're asking for special treatment you have no right to receive. Barbara McQuade, former U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Michigan and a law professor at the University of Michigan, appeared on MSNBC on October 24th and provided crucial context. She said, "What Trump is trying to do is normalize the idea that presidents and former presidents should be immune from criminal accountability. That's not what the Constitution says. That's not what our legal system provides. If he succeeds in establishing that precedent, it would fundamentally alter American democracy. We would effectively have an elected king who could commit crimes with impunity." And here's what makes her analysis particularly significant. McQuade is a former federal prosecutor who's handled complex financial crimes cases. She understands both the legal standards and the practical realities of building criminal cases. When she says Trump's position would create an elected monarchy, she's not being hyperbolic. She's describing the logical consequence of accepting Trump's legal theory. If a president can commit crimes while in office and then claim immunity from investigation and prosecution after leaving office, when exactly can they be held accountable? The answer Trump's lawyers give is never, and that's incompatible with democracy. So let's break down what this showdown could mean, because it's not just a captivating legal story. It has serious consequences for how our democratic system operates. First up is the immediate political fallout. Trump is already facing significant backlash due to the mounting legal pressures, and his approval ratings are taking a hit. Republican representatives are getting anxious about the upcoming 2024 elections, which is definitely adding to the tension. Having the Supreme Court unanimously reject his emergency stay, forcing the release of potentially damaging financial documents, is not the best look for him. Most folks in America have a good deal of respect for the Supreme Court as a vital part of our constitutional system, even if they don't always agree with its decisions. When that court unanimously rules against you, it carries weight. Democrats are definitely planning to take advantage of this situation. They'll argue that Trump believes he's above the law and does not hold the Constitution in high regard, and they'll have the Supreme Court's unanimous ruling backing up those claims. This is going to be Exhibit A in proving that Trump's claims of political persecution are baseless. You can expect to see this Supreme Court rejection popping up in Democratic campaign ads, speeches, and debates. Even the conservative Supreme Court Trump built rejected his claims unanimously is a pretty compelling talking point. It cuts through the political noise because it's not partisan. These aren't Democratic judges. These aren't Obama appointees. These are the conservative justices Trump specifically chose, and they still said no. Now let's touch on what this means for the Supreme Court itself and the broader judicial system. Chief Justice Roberts has been working hard to keep the court out of overtly political battles, wanting it to be viewed as above partisan influence. But by issuing this swift, unanimous rejection of Trump's emergency stay, the court has waded right into a political controversy. Trump and his supporters are now poised to attack Roberts and the conservative justices, implying bias and questioning their motives, which complicates things for the court's image as a neutral entity. Yet Roberts probably felt he had no other choice. If he and the other justices had granted the stay or taken longer to consider Trump's application, it would have looked like they were giving special treatment to a former president who appointed 3 of them. That would have damaged the court's credibility even more than the political attacks they're now facing. And here's the broader principle at stake. At the heart of this case is whether a former president can simply refuse to comply with criminal subpoenas whenever he feels like it. If Trump gets his way on that, it could totally change how our legal system operates. The American constitutional system is built on checks and balances. The executive branch has power, but it's not absolute. The legislative branch can investigate and impeach. The judicial branch can compel testimony and documents. No branch is supreme. That design is intentional. The founders feared concentrated power. They feared leaders who could act without accountability. They specifically rejected the idea of executive immunity or privilege that would place presidents above the law. But Trump has always been uncomfortable with those limitations. He craves total control over everything. During his presidency, he claimed absolute immunity from investigation. He claimed executive privilege over virtually everything. He claimed the power to pardon himself. He claimed he could ignore subpoenas from Congress. Now he's claiming that even as a former president, he can't be criminally investigated. If these violations are allowed, that's a significant boost to executive power, and it opens the door for future presidents to misuse that authority. Imagine a future president who knows they can commit financial crimes, obstruct justice, or abuse power with no fear of criminal accountability. That's not a democracy. That's an autocracy. So the implications of this case reach far beyond just Trump and the Manhattan District Attorney. It's about shaping the structure of American government for many years to come. Each time Trump brushes aside norms, breaks laws, or attacks institutions, it weakens our democratic systems. It starts making behavior that used to be completely unacceptable feel normal. Think about it. If Trump can refuse to comply with criminal subpoenas, claim absolute immunity from investigation, and face no consequences, what's to stop the next president from doing the same? If he can just delay and appeal indefinitely whenever accountability approaches, what's to prevent another leader from following that lead? These actions don't just disappear when Trump leaves office or fades from politics. They become part of our new reality, and that's pretty dangerous. Democracy relies on those norms and institutions, assuming that people in power will play by the rules, even when it's a bit inconvenient. When those norms crumble, democracy itself starts to falter. You end up with a system where power matters more than law, where political connections matter more than evidence, where wealth and influence can buy freedom from accountability. That's not what the founders envisioned. That's not what Americans expect from their system of government. Looking ahead to the 2024 presidential race, it's clear that all of this is going to have some significant effects. We're still over a year out from those elections, but the narrative being set now is bound to influence how things go. If the story playing out is one of Trump battling every institution and coming out on the losing side, that spells trouble for his campaign and for Republicans generally. Voters usually don't reward chaos and dysfunction. They want stability and competence. Right now, Trump isn't offering either of those. His legal battles are multiplying. His court losses are mounting. His arguments are being rejected unanimously even by judges he appointed. And now, financial documents that he's fought for years to keep secret are being turned over to prosecutors. So expect Democrats to champion a message focused on restoring normalcy and respect for the rule of law. After years of chaos under Trump, there are folks who believe that if you vote Democratic, institutions will actually start working again. They're promising no more constant constitutional crisis or squabbles with courts and investigators, just good old normal governance where people follow the law and accept accountability. That message might just hit home for a lot of voters, including some Republicans who are exhausted by the constant drama. But here's where Warren Buffett's comment becomes particularly significant. When one of the most respected businessmen in America, someone known for his integrity and his careful analysis, says Trump's financial records will reveal practices that wouldn't pass muster in legitimate businesses, that carries enormous weight with moderate voters and business-friendly Republicans. Buffett didn't say this casually. He's famously measured in his public statements. For him to make this observation during a CNBC interview suggests he's seen enough, heard enough from his own networks in the business and financial world to believe something significant is coming. And when Buffett speaks, investors listen. Market analysts listen. Bankers listen. These are Trump's people, the business community he claims to represent. If they start concluding that Trump's financial dealings can't withstand scrutiny, The political and economic consequences could be devastating. So here's the deal. Donald Trump just suffered a unanimous Supreme Court rejection in his attempt to block the release of financial documents that prosecutors believe will reveal decades of potential fraud. This isn't just another court case or another legal setback. It's a fundamental question of whether a former president can simply refuse to comply with criminal investigations and claim immunity from accountability. If Trump's position were allowed to stand, then we're basically saying the rule of law doesn't matter anymore for people who've held presidential power. That would mean we're stepping into a completely new realm where former presidents exist above the law, where they can commit crimes with impunity, where accountability becomes impossible. The Supreme Court, including the 3 justices Trump himself appointed, just said that's not how American democracy works. They said it unanimously. They said it swiftly. They said it without even asking for a response from the other side because Trump's arguments were that weak. It's about so much more than just financial records or tax fraud. It's about whether we genuinely have a legal system that applies equally to everyone, or if we're just stuck with whoever can accumulate enough power and money to avoid consequences. So keep an eye on this, because things are just heating up. Those financial documents are being turned over to prosecutors as we speak. The Manhattan District Attorney's investigation is moving forward. Other jurisdictions are watching closely. The January 6 cases are progressing. The classified documents case is proceeding. The Georgia election interference case is developing. Trump is facing legal jeopardy on multiple fronts simultaneously, and the Supreme Court just signaled they're not going to bail him out. The next few weeks are going to be crucial as prosecutors begin analyzing those financial records and deciding what charges, if any, to bring. Warren Buffett's warning that the records will be quite revealing suggests there's real substance there, not just political noise. The stakes have never been higher, the evidence stronger, and the outcome more unpredictable. This ride is far from over.